Hello, everybody. Jimmy here, Veganic Grower, final season finale, episode number 18. Thank you for coming, Peaches and Sugar. And yeah, I had to send out a message this morning because as of Sunday last, I've been battling COVID, recovering slowly. But man, it's a nasty one. So if you've had it, then you know, and if you don't have it or haven't had it, you don't want it. There's nothing good about it. It's the worst type of flu I've ever felt. Um, just feels profound. It feels deep. Anyway, so that's what I'm battling from. So I'm trying to make it through 30 minutes. We'll see. I'm not sure. Before I start, I want to mention I had a really wonderful conference at the Montreal Vegan Festival a couple of Sundays ago. I'm waiting for a video. It turns out the Montreal Vegan Festival was running short on money, so they weren't able to film them this year. But I have a friend or someone who I know who taped it, but I haven't been able to locate the video yet, or maybe it hasn't been uploaded yet. Anyway, as soon as I can, I will go. But there was one very special announcement that I made. So for those of you that are listening now or are going to listen later, hopefully you'll find this special too. My book, The Veganic Grower's Handbook, Cultivating Fruits, Vegetables, and Herbs from Urban Backyard to Rural Farmyard. This book is a safe space for us vegans. No longer will we have to suffer through chapters where they talk about the use of manures or animal fertilizers or using animal husbandry in our systems, or how important or how necessary this is. This particular handbook follows really everything that we've talked about on these shows, from garden planning and seed starting to maintenance and insect pressures and disease pressures. So I will show the cover again. Let me see if I can get it closer. You can also see it. It's called the Veganic Grower's Handbook. You can also see it on Amazon.com or Amazon.ca. It's there for pre-order. I never pre-order anything. I wait before it comes out, and I would recommend everybody do the same because you never know. Yeah, so it's very exciting. It'll be published on the 14th of February, 2023, so Valentine's Day of next year, by the wonderful Lantern Books and Media. I've been absolutely fortunate and blessed to have had to be picked up as an author. I don't know if people are out there know, but to become a published author is not very likely in this world. Out of every 100 people, only one gets chosen. So it's about 1%. Yeah, so that's that. So that's very, very exciting, not just for me, but for vegans of the world, for people that wish to farm more compassionately and kindly. And yeah, all you people out there, thank you for your congratulations. And yeah, it's going to be a good time. And it's not just me who put out a book. An acquaintance I met this year who've become quite good social buddies, social media buddies, or the last year has been Helen Athau, who also is publishing her book. I don't have the title in front of me, but she is just a brilliant farmer, organic farmer turned veganic farmer, now in Oregon, and she's also publishing a book that's coming out in June next year. So with Will Bonsal's book on radical gardening, my book, The Veganic Grower's Handbook, and Helen Athau's book, and of course Ian Tolhurst's book, Growing Green, we are all going to have all the resources we could possibly need to grow our gardens and our homesteads and our farms veganically. So that's very cool. So it has been an amazing journey for this show, and it's kind of cool that it was the decision to follow the gardening season because the show actually was up to the guises of what Mother Nature wished us to be also. So starting the very first show on the 3rd of February, you probably didn't know this. I probably didn't even mention it because I was so nervous to get the first show out. But we were in the middle of a major snowstorm. And because we're on satellite internet here, before I can even get satellite access, I have to go and brush off the snow off the satellite. And so I had to do that just before the show started. So I realized it was snowing sideways and it was quite sticky. And sure enough, at 6:40, I went out there all bunched up in minus 15, minus 20 degree weather and scraped off the satellite just so we could get the first show in. Then, of course, the massive inland hurricane that passed through here on the 21st of May that knocked out our power for 9 days and knocked out that show by a week. The 26th show, we had to then knock it back till the 3rd of June. And then a perfectly timed thunderstorm that knocked out what I was hoping was going to be one of my most favorite shows, and then ended up having to do it 2 weeks later, and it wasn't very good. I always feel that's the one regret I have for this year, is that I wish I would have done the seed saving show again. But that perfectly timed thunderstorm knocked us out just at the perfect time. I realized that you can't prepare for something 2 weeks before and then expect to have the same ideas in your head 2 weeks later. So anyway, besides the point, Mother Nature knocked us out again. Which brings me to the very first reflection of the evening, which is what this show is all about. It's all about our reflections. It's about taking a step back. It's about breathing in this wonderful fall air, eating the last of our, as Peaches and Sugar said, the last of her pea shoots and lettuces and blackberries and raspberries that she has out there in Nova Scotia. And taking it all in and thinking about what our seasons were like. Be thankful for every moment that we're healthy, for every moment that we are able to breathe that air, for every moment that we're able to live on this earth with all other creatures surrounding us, and be able to do what it is we do with our hands in the soil. We really should be grateful for that, and if we're not, well, we're missing the point. The point is that it is a blessing. This moment is present. So it means it's a gift, right? So we should really look at it that way and never forget that. I just turned 50 this year, and I've been living this way a really long time. It's been 18 years. I've been a farmer, and it's 25 I've been growing my food. So I understand this better than a lot of people, but still there are times when I go through my day and it feels like drudgery. It feels like another day of looking at couch grass, or another day of having to look for Colorado potato beetles, or another day of rain and rain and rain, or in Arizona another day of 110 degrees or 45 degrees and sunshine. But these are the blessings. There's going to be challenges no matter where we live. So this leads to my first reflection. After all that time, it's Mother Nature. It's the Earth Mother that dictates ultimately our successes and failures of the growing year. But for me, no matter how unknown the years are going to be, I will always, as long as I am able, grow my own food. Whether or not I'll always be a farmer, I mean, eventually you have to stop. This is for the young. Being a farmer is definitely for the young, but growing your own food you can do forever. My father is 85. He just planted his first garden like 9 years ago. My grandfather gardened every day up until his 97th birthday. So this is something that will always stick with us. That's my biggest reflection. It's one of my greatest joys, is that I can get out there and you can go ahead and put your hands in the dirt and you can go ahead and feel the vibrations and the pulse of the Earth Mother. Anyway, first reflection of the night. Second, and this one is I find really interesting, even with an absolute record rainfall summer season here in Buelo, just terrible amount of sunshine days. I think that We were lucky to get 2 sunny days per week. We had tomatoes that it wasn't just us, it was a lot of farms in our region that were just having trouble even getting tomatoes to ripen. And it's because there was no sunshine. If you don't have sun, tomatoes aren't going to turn. It just isn't going to happen. So, anyway, continuing. So there were portions of the farm that the bed surface remained wet from that inland hurricane on the 21st of May all the way until now. We lost an entire field. I've mentioned this before, and I will always bring this up because I think this is pretty astounding. We lost an entire field because it was so wet the entire year. We just couldn't plant it. And even so, even with that record rainfall and those horrible sunshine, not enough sunshiny days, we just had our second best harvest year, acre per acre ever. Only till last year. And last year was phenomenal. Last year, it could not have been better for most things. And yet this year, even with all of that, it was the second best harvest year, acre per acre. So this proves, without a shadow of a doubt, again in my mind, that a low-till, organic composting, focusing on soil fertility, health, no spraying approach, letting all plant materials compost in the bed using cover crops to help build the soil. All of it works, and not only works exceptionally well. Just like in my book that's going to come out, and just like in the shows, that there's absolutely no reason that we need to inundate our soils with products of animals. Not only that, I was having a conversation on Facebook the other day with somebody who was starting a raised bed gardening system, pretty cool urban gardening system in Sweden. And she was asking what she should be using to put on her soil, put on top of her beds in the wintertime. And of course, there are people out there who were talking about chip branch wood. They just call them wood chips, and dry leaf and things like this. And this is all wonderful. And she was considering growing green manures, rye, cutting it down, and then putting that on top. So making a layering system so the microorganisms of the soil had something to eat. And in our discussion, we were talking about compost, and I had mentioned that it should be really 100% plant-based compost. And the reason is this, is that if anybody is using a manure-based compost, the animals that have digested all the greens, that green grass has already digested all the nutriment. So in the end, what you're getting from the manure is just the waste product. You're not even getting all the goodness from the green grass anymore. So if we believe that in order to have a healthy soil, we need all 17 macro, and micro elements to be in the soil, well, the only way we're really going to get that is from plants, because every well-growing plant is going to have all 17. But manure is not going to have 17. Might have 5, might have maybe even 8, but it's not going to have 17. So anyway, it's just a very interesting philosophy, because you never know at what point in the season a plant may want, say, nickel, which if it has an excess toxin of whatever, then nickel helps produce urease, which helps the plant excrete whatever toxin or overabundance of element it has in its system. So you don't know what plant is going to have nickel, or at what point the plant wants to have nickel, but it wants to have it at a certain moment in its life. And the only way that we can get there is through plants. Reflections. Gotta love reflective time. So what were our biggest things that we learned? Because every year, and there's always something more. There's always something more that we decide to try. And when you live in the same place, the benefit of me, yeah, there's a lot of benefits of me. The benefit of being able to have worked in so many different environments that I did is that I was able to experience many, many, many different systems and see many, many different ecosystems. So when I'm traveling throughout, when I was able to have a farm in Arizona and I was able to talk to other Arizona farmers, it's completely different than living obviously in Quebec and talking with all Quebec farmers. But then from there, living in the tropics of Hawaii and then traveling all the way down through Mexico and working in Belize and Ecuador and Costa Rica, you have the opportunity to see these systems that you would just never see if you're living in your own place. Even if you do have the opportunity to go see, like I know that most farmers, they try to get out, especially if they're very interested, they try to get out and go see other systems and other parts of the world. And yeah, and that's great. And for me, it'd be the same thing, but not just seeing, but actually experiencing it with my hands. So that has been such a benefit to me, because then I am able to think about, when I'm planting different crops, how best to manage each one based on what I've seen before. Because there are times here in Quebec, especially when we have those really humid, hot summers, it's very similar to growing in Hawaii. It's very similar to growing in Ecuador. It's very similar as growing in Costa Rica. It's very similar to tropical rainforest, because that's kind of what it feels like. So you sort of manage it that way. Anyway, digressing, but it's been a benefit. The keys to successful cucurbit harvests for us, so things like cucumbers and summer squash, winter squash, and melons, for us was to plant after the warm and settled date, but even a little bit further than that. So we decided to push our date this year to the 15th of June. And by doing that, and we got lucky this year with the weather, in that because it was so wet, the nights stayed warmer. Whereas when it's a drier June, we can have those really snap cold nights that really, really stunt our cucurbits, and had in years past. But let's just say that this year we hit the right date by hitting it on the 15th of June. And by doing so, the cucurbits, especially the cucumbers, they never really saw temperatures below 13 degrees, which means that they never checked. Once we put the plants in the ground, we always transplant all our cucumbers. Once we put the transplants in the ground, they just grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, and they didn't stop. And they didn't get cucumber mosaic virus, and they didn't get rust, and there's a lot of things they didn't get because the nights just didn't get cold. They definitely didn't get powdery mildew either. So because of that, the cucumber production this year, the harvest was the best ever. Winter squash, another example. Now we always have to plant winter squash when we have to, but with the nights being a little bit warmer because of this rainier year, it was the best winter squash harvest ever. We did the same thing with the summer squash. Summer squash, once you put in the plants, are very fast. They're only about 30 days to start giving fruit, maybe even 28. So we planted after the warm and settled date, and which is about 2 weeks later than what we normally do. And when we planted 2 weeks earlier, yeah, of course we would get earlier summer squash, but the plants would be paltry. This year I had plants as tall as me. I mean, the leaves on some of these plants were huge. And usually when you have that condition of a lot of nitrogen so that you're producing these big bushy plants, you don't get a lot of fruit. Here was exactly the opposite. We had these huge bushy plants with huge amounts of fruit. But it wasn't just the date. We also tried other things too. Instead of using to completely decomposted compost, we had read that, and I believe this is from Yves Gagnon, that they like a young compost, a new compost. So we always have different ages of compost lying around. And one of the ones that we had was probably only 3 or 4 months old, the one that we just turned after the winter time. So started decomposing again in May. So we would put it on just before planting in June. It was still quite not broken down. There was still quite a lot of there wasn't whole, say, apple cores anymore, but you could tell that it was still breaking down. So we used that. primarily on all of our cucurbit beds. Planted the plants, and then when it was time to go ahead and put straw, instead of putting a completely dry straw, what we did, especially for the cucumbers, is I would cut the grass, which is a native flora, and let it dry somewhat, maybe just for 3 or 4 days, and then use that. So it was still decomposing also. Kind of this idea that Ruth Stout has of using a green or kind of a rotted hay. Well, it wasn't necessarily old and rotted, but it was still decomposing. And all of that decomposing action. And it's funny because there are definitely gardening books that will say, never do this. You're going to bring bacterial problems or fungal problems into your plants. It's best to keep like plants away from your plants. It's all a bunch of phooey, because what ends up happening is all of those plants, all of that green material just continues to break down and continues to make food for the microorganisms, which continue to move nutrients around, can help the fungal filament, the fungal systems in the soil, help move nutrients around as well. And all of that feeds the plant, which then produces, like this year, a record amount of cucumbers, winter squash, summer squash, and even melons. It wasn't a bad year for melons. We actually planted the melons on the 20th of June. We planted a Charente, and then we planted an organic hybrid cantaloupe. Still haven't found the most perfect cantaloupe. But because of all the rains and lack of sunshine, the melons didn't get very big, but we ended up getting quite a few and getting up. I think we harvested almost 50 off our 50-foot row, which for us is quite good. Normally in a good year, you should be getting 150 on a 50-foot row or 200 on a 50-foot row. But for us, that doesn't happen because it's dependent on so many things. Either we get hit by the frost. Anyway, but for us, the cucurbit year was a good one. And I think that's why. This is going to be my last reflection because I'm getting awfully tired. Brussels sprouts. I love Brussels sprouts. I don't know if any of you have tried growing Brussels sprouts, but we have never, ever had highly successful luck with Brussels sprouts. The yields have always been paltry. There was one year that we were able to harvest them. And so this year we cut back quite a bit. I only planted about 15 plants. And they're tricky because they're a super long season. They're about 120 days. But I love Brussels sprouts. I just think they're one of nature's goodness of foods. They're just little cabbages all rolled up, all balled up, super ball, and you can just cut them in half and fry them up in a little bit of oil and salt, a little liver elementar. What's liver elementar? Nutritional yeast, some paprika, and they're just the best. So the secret with Brussels sprouts is that you want the stems to get thick, like a broccoli stem, as thick as possible, and you want them to have nice big leaves, and then you grow. But what you eat from the Brussels sprouts are the bud shoots. So you kind of want to force the Brussels sprout to start putting out its flower bud, because that's the part that we're going to eat. So they will start doing this based on the daylight, pretty much. Maybe if it's a 120-day crop from transplant, from seed. So if it's about 110 days from transplant, after about 75 days, they're going to start putting out their little buds. So usually, about 30 days before we harvest, we cut off the tops of the Brussels sprout plants, and that'll then force the little Brussels sprouts to start swelling. And the Brussels sprouts always taste better after a couple of freezes. Now they can handle down to -4, -5. After that, they'll just stop growing. So you really want them to be able to have put out the Brussels sprouts already, their little sprouts. But because we manipulate all of our brassicas with insect row covers, and we take them on and off to check to make sure that, or to weed, or or sometimes we wait before we plant the understory under the undercover. Sorry, legs are getting tired. Under cropping of clover. Sometimes the plants get damaged. And in this particular case, that's exactly what happened with one of my Brussels sprout plants, is that the top had already gotten cut off somehow, maybe 2 weeks earlier than the others. And I had noticed this when I went to go cut off the tops a month before it was going to be able time to harvest. So I was going to cut them off about early September. This one had probably got cut off maybe mid-August. Well, wouldn't you know that the one that got cut off in mid-August had the biggest, most beautiful Brussels sprouts. So there you go. So instead of the secret being 30 days before you're going to harvest the Brussels sprouts, maybe the secret is here, only here, maybe not other places. It was 45 days before harvest. Because what ends up happening here with the amount of daylight that we have up here in the Grand North is that the daylight really starts falling off. And it is true that here up in the Grand North that everything starts really slowing down in its growth production starting about early September. It just doesn't grow the same as it does, obviously, in spring or in early summer. So there you go. So it's a very cool reflection. And I wouldn't have known this unless I observed it. So you write these kinds of things down in the observation logs and you go from there. So it brings me really to my final thoughts of this entire season is that we really never know what tomorrow is going to bring. Last Saturday afternoon, I was feeling just perfect, hunky-dory, kind of maybe feeling a little tired, but no big deal. Woke up Sunday morning, had COVID. You just never know. One day you're fine, the next day you're not. And because what we know about COVID is you don't know how long it's going to take, and you don't know how long it's going to be in you, and you don't know if you're going to have symptoms 3 months down the line. It's just the way this nasty little bugger works. So we really are blessed to be in this time when we have our health, when we're able to do what we can with our hands in the dirt, like I mentioned earlier in the show. The final thoughts are sometimes the beginning. Everything continues to go in a circle. Just like the gardening season, it's a garden wheel. Just like our lives is a wheel. We start, we live, we die, we continue on. Just transform. Everything is a transformation. So anyway, it's also been a really, really big pleasure of mine to be able to speak with you pretty much every 2 weeks since the beginning of February. We never know what's going to happen next year. We never really even decide on that. For us, we don't decide on that until very much later. So I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the shows. It's been fun for me as well. I've been love watching the comments as they come along. And I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful fall with the last of your harvest. And as always, as veganic growers, what I wish more than anything else is that all beings are freed from our exploitative hands. We can do this little by little, and wishing that there is peace on this heaven that we call Earth. Thank you, peace, and have a good, great, great, great